Hey y'all, welcome back. My name is Christina, and here on my channel I love to talk about the baby whisperer Tracy Hogg and her book The Baby Whisperer Solves All Your Problems. Today we are going to be talking about Tracy Hogg's opinion on cry it out sleep training techniques. So we're really going to look at what cry it out is, what it does to your baby, the dangers of it, and if you've tried it before and it hasn't worked, what you can do instead in order to sleep train your baby. So if you have read her book, it's very obvious that she is totally against all cry it out methods when it comes to sleep training, which is why she invented her method called the pick up, put down method of sleep training, which does not leave your baby alone. You stand with them the whole time until they fall asleep, working to get them to sleep and actively working to teach them sleep as well. So you've probably heard of cry it out if you are considering a sleep training method. It's kind of a general broad term that we use when we refer to several types of sleep training methods. It could also be known as controlled crying, continuous crying, the Ferber method, or anything else like that. Those are just all different methods that basically leave your baby to cry it out. A sleep training method is a cry it out method if it leaves your baby, so you are not in the room with them and they are crying, and the point is basically to ignore their cry to teach them that they need to fall asleep independently. The Ferber method does involve going back in to your child and assuring them with your voice, but the fact that there is any period of time where you are leaving your child alone to cry and to figure out sleep independently means that it is technically a cry it out method. I do want to clarify that cry it out does not mean that it's any crying that's related to sleep. Babies still use crying as their main form of communication, so when they're tired, they're going to cry. And that doesn't necessarily mean that it's the same cry as the cry it out cry. Tracy Hogg makes a very clear point to say that cry it out cries are more of an abandonment cry, and they're actually designed to get us to come back into the room because our child knows that they are alone and they want us to come back and be with them. Which is why if you've ever heard a testimony from a parent who has done or tried cry it out, that they say it's very difficult to do because you have to listen to your child basically asking for you to come back into the room. And you have to ignore it and you have to hope that they figure out how to sleep on their own. So in Tracy Hogg's pick up put down method, there is crying involved because crying is involved with sleep at this age, and you're looking at babies around the age of 4 months. Usually the cry is completely different from a cry it out cry. It's just a tired cry. And when I did pick up put down with my daughter, I could really tell the difference, that it was a cry of her not necessarily asking me to do anything, but she was kind of just expressing that she was tired and that she wanted to go to sleep. And as I did pick up put down, was actively in there trying to get her to sleep. So knew I was doing all that I could to help her sleep. So there was no like tension with the crying in that method. With cry out methods, you could picture being a mom, like standing outside the door listening to your child crying and just being like, I need to go in there, or I want to and I can't, But with the pick up put down, I didn't know how I'd feel about her cry, and I was really okay with it because she was crying, she was tired, but it wasn't asking me to do anything more. I knew I was doing everything that I could to help my daughter sleep and to teach her how to do it independently. So the best way to avoid cry it out methods and sleep props is to do pick up put down. So I do have a couple videos that I've done about pick up put down. I've done one that talks about her chapter in the book, and then another video that talks about my actual experience doing it with my daughter. So if you are interested in learning more about pick up put down, I definitely recommend watching those videos. And if you haven't read Tracy Hogg's book already, that is going to have the most information for pick up put down in it as well. I do want to say that maybe even just as mothers, it's even more particularly difficult for us to actually listen to our children cry and to not do anything about it. Or even if you are doing something about it, some parents do struggle with pick up put down, with listening to their child cry, and they almost feel guilty because they're allowing their child to cry. and it might just be going on for longer than expected. I think we have this mindset that when our child starts to cry, the point is to get them to stop crying as soon as possible, because essentially that means that their need is met, so they don't need to cry any longer. And with a tired cry, doing pick up, put down, obviously you want pick up, put down to not last very long, but they are probably going to cry almost the entire time you're doing pick up, put down until they do start drifting off into sleep. And eventually, as you continue to do pick up, put down more, they are going to get better and faster at going to sleep, and so that crying time will be cut down as well. It's okay if the crying bothers us. It just might be a natural part of being a mom. I know mothers who, when their child cries, they cannot stand it. They have to stop it immediately. There's other mothers who can tolerate it for a little longer, and I totally get both ends of that. But the danger of feeling guilty or disliking our child's cry, especially when we are doing sleep training, is that we will give in to our child and depend on a sleep prop. So if you were to do cry it out and you couldn't stand your child's crying and you go back into the room, you're going back to sleep props. You're stopping sleep training by doing that. And if you're doing pick up, put down and you can't stand your child's crying in that way, and you depend on a sleep prop like a pacifier or breastfeeding or rocking or even bouncing or anything like that in order to help them sleep, then you're also stopping sleep training by doing that. And so sleep prop, I would say, is the opposite of what cry it out is. Essentially, cry it out is leaving them with nothing. Sleep props is giving them anything, giving them everything to get them to stop crying. And pick up, put down, I would consider to be in the middle there. And Tracy Hogg also just calls it her middle of the road technique because she tries to be a reasonable person, and she says that she just does things down the middle of the road, and I would totally agree with that with this method. So just talking about the danger of cry it out sleep training, if you are considering that, I do want to say I've never tried it before. I have heard lots of testimonies from parents who have done some form of cry it out sleep training, and it's worked. The thing is, you just have to be consistent in it. Like what I mentioned before, with if a mother goes back into the room after she's left her baby to cry it out for any certain amount of time, then she's essentially undoing the sleep training, and she's teaching her child that sometimes they'll be left alone and sometimes she'll be there, and that is really confusing for them. And so that is one of the main dangers of cry it out, is kind of creating a fear of abandonment. Tracy Hogg would boil it all down to breaking the bonds of trust. So you are essentially teaching your child that they don't know if they can trust that you'll come back when you leave them, and that they don't know when you'll come back if you do leave them. And even if you do cry it out and you are consistent with it, but your child isn't taking it well, they're taking hours to fall asleep, it's been a few days and they're still not getting a good amount of sleep, they could even be developing a fear of their crib or a fear of their room, or even just a fear during the day of you leaving them, then that would be another sign that cry it out is not working, and that there has been a bond of trust that has been broken there, and that your child can no longer depend upon you when it comes to sleep and even daytime activities. Another downside of cry it out is that you kind of are leaving your child to figure it out for yourself. One thing Tracy Hogg stresses with pick up, put down is that we are in there actively teaching our children how to sleep, and that is a gift that we can impart on them. And pick up, put down is a lot of work. It's not easy. It's physical labor and it takes time. You'll even have to sacrifice your sleep for a couple of days in order to do it right. But it's what's probably best for our children when it comes to teaching a skill. Instead of leaving our children to figure out sleep, which eventually they could do on their own with cry it out, we are working to teach them. And that's something that I absolutely love about this method of pick up, put down sleep training, is that I get to be so involved with teaching my daughter sleep, and it doesn't mean I have to leave her. And even though I am working hard, I know I'll see good results and that I don't have to worry about those bonds of trust being broken. In fact, they'll probably even be stronger because my daughter knows that I will be with her to help her sleep. And the last danger I'd say of cry it out is that it makes you feel really guilty, and you could in result be inconsistent. So what I mentioned before with the inconsistency of going into your child's room when you're trying to do a cry it out sleep method is a result of guilt. It could also just be a result of your reaction to the method not working, but it does mean that you're going to be inconsistent, especially if you are going in there and you are giving them a sleep prop after you've tried cry it out, or if you are kind of letting your guilt get to you during the day. Maybe even a cry it out method is working at night, but during the day you might breastfeed them more because you feel bad. You could spend more time with them and be more in their face, things like that. You could even variate from a routine or a ritual throughout the day because you feel bad about putting your child to sleep, or even delay their bedtime or nap times as a result. I do want to say that I've heard lots of testimonies from parents that cry it out methods have worked. So I personally am not completely against them. I have decided that I'm not going to ever try those methods because pick up, put down worked for us, and that's what I plan to do with the rest of our children. But if you want to do a cry it out method, or if you have done one successfully, I really don't think that there's anything wrong with it, because I do think that you as a parent can still have a good relationship with your child, and that they're not gonna always feel abandoned while you are sleep training them with cry it out methods. Tracy Hogg is totally against it, never recommends it. And of course, the biggest danger here is when we are not consistent with a cry it out method, that we confuse our children even further. I do want to say as well that cry it out methods are always worse whenever they are attempted before 4 months of age. You could do like 3.5 months at the earliest, but anything before that is just going to be worse. Your child is not ready to be sleep trained until they are closer to 4 months. That is when their circadian rhythm matures and their sleep cycles mature, and it looks totally different. Sleep totally changes for them at that age, so that's when sleep training is perfect. I have heard of parents attempting cry it out as early as 6 to 8 weeks, and I just would not recommend that to anybody. That will definitely damage your child's relationship with sleep, and you'll probably not see any good results at that point at all. You can't even try pick up, put down. At that point, you have to wait until 4 months. And if you do have a baby who is not yet 3.5 to 4 months, there are ways you can get them to sleep and teach them sleep. That is also in Tracy Hogg's book, and I do have a video on that as well. I'll link it up top so you can watch it. So what happens if you've tried cry it out and it hasn't worked? Can you undo what you've done? The answer is yes. And Tracy Hogg has a whole thing in her book. If you do have the book, pages 240 to 242 are really great. It's just a quick story about a parent who had tried cry it out, and her daughter developed a fear of her crib and a fear of being alone and a fear of sleep, and what Tracy Hogg did to help counteract that. So you can still teach sleep, obviously. It just takes more time. You need to go slower because bonds of trust have been broken. So not only are you teaching sleep, but you need to repair the trust that's been broken and fix any fears that have developed from cry it out. So essentially, you would do pick up, put down with your child, but you would stay in the room with them the whole night. So Tracy Hogg suggests having like a blow up mattress or a bunch of pads that you can sleep on in their room, and that you would sleep on the floor. She even has a story of her like crawling into a child's crib to sleep with them during a nap to help them feel safe in their crib, because their crib was what they were afraid of. And I want to stress that this is not co-sleeping. Co-sleeping is when you take your child into your bed or into your room. But if you're sleeping with your child in their room or in their bed, you can help them feel more safe by being there. Obviously, you don't want this to continue more than 3 nights, because anything more than that and your presence will become a sleep prop, and that will become the thing that your child depends on for sleep. The goal is to be there long enough to keep them comfortable in the room, so that when they wake up throughout the night while you're sleep training, you are just right there and they feel safe, that they're not abandoned. And you can even slowly throughout those days, those 3 days you're sleep training, move that mattress closer to the door. And there's also a sleep training method called the chair method, where you sit in a chair and you move that closer to the door every day. So you could develop it into that if your child needs more time with you in the room. But with the chair method, you would leave as soon as your child is asleep. So you might not actually be there in the room when they wake up. And if you have an older child, or maybe a child who's been sleep trained, and they come to you in the night because something happens, maybe they're afraid, they had a bad dream, or maybe they just aren't sleeping very well. This is another way you can use this method, is instead of saying, oh, get into the bed with me, you can go to their room and sleep, and that helps them feel comfortable in their room. So this has not happened yet with our daughter. She can't get out. She's still in her crib, so she can't get out of it yet. And I'm just going to let her stay in there as long as she wants. But essentially, if she were to come to me in the middle of the night and say like, oh, I'm afraid that there's something, you know, in my room, me bringing her into my bed and saying you're safe here is sending her the wrong message. It's sending her the message of, there actually might be something in your room. You're right, there might be something to be afraid of. But in reality, in my head, I'm just too tired to get out of bed and help her. I just want her to come into my bed so that I don't have to get up. But the best thing for her in that situation, and the thing that will cause long-term success for her to have comfort in her room, is for me to go with her to her room and stay in there with her so that she can be comfortable and know that there's nothing there that would hurt her or scare her. And so it's that idea, even at 4 months of age, your child might have the same fear, very simplified version of it, but when you leave the room, they might need you to come back in just so that you can feel, or so that they can feel safe there. And by bringing them out of their room or out of their crib, teaching them to sleep in your bed, teaching them to sleep anywhere besides their crib, teaches them that their crib might actually be something that they could be afraid of. If they're afraid of it and you take them somewhere else, you're teaching them like, oh yeah, I totally get it. It's a really scary place in there, and that's not going to help them sleep independently in their bed or their room. Also, if you have tried Cry It Out and you do see that your child has some mistrust with you during the day, like if you walk into the other room and they kind of freak out, you want to be careful not to let your guilt get in the way there. I kind of mentioned this earlier, but it's important to not, it's kind of the same concept. You don't want to, if they do start crying, because say they're on the floor in the living room and you're in the kitchen and they can't see you anymore, you don't want to go in there and swoop in and pick them up and say like, oh, you're safe up here in my arms, you weren't on the floor, good thing you cried to let me know. But what's helpful is you can get down on the floor with them. You can, you know, still hold them and comfort them, or even sit down and slowly pick them up, not like whisking them up. But the goal is to help them to become comfortable on their own and to teach them like that even if you're in the other room and you're nearby, that they're not abandoned even if they can't see you, and that there is safe places around the house that aren't just your arms that they can be, and that they don't have to be afraid of being there. So it's important that we just don't smother our children during the day, that we don't try to make up for any Cry It Out that we have done with them at night or during naps, and that we just stay consistent and help them to feel secure both during the day and at night. So that comes to the end of our video. Basically, when it comes to Cry It Out, I would just recommend avoiding it at all costs. But if you have done it and it hasn't worked, then there are lots of ways that you can make up for it. It just might take a little more work and effort on your part, but in the long run, it would be totally worth it. So if you haven't read Tracy Hogg's book, if you haven't tried Pick Up, Put Down, or you don't know anything about it, please do research on it. It's really like, you can barely even Google it and find results on it. So that's why I'm trying to put out this content so that I can help y'all if you're interested in doing Pick Up, Put Down as well. So stay tuned to videos. Go ahead and subscribe so you can know when more videos are coming out. Give this video a thumbs up, and if you have any questions or comments or anything that pertains to Cry It Out or sleep training or anything, please feel free to leave those down below. I'd love to hear from y'all. Thanks for watching.